The mark of the beast is one of the most haunting and misunderstood symbols in Christian esotericism. Found in the book of Revelation, specifically Revelation 13:16-18, it reads, "And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark. And his number is 666. For nearly 2,000 years, this verse has ignited a fire in the collective imagination, sparking fear, fascination, and fiery debate. It has been the center of sermons and the seed of speculation, interpreted both literally and metaphorically by theologians and mystics alike. Depending on who's reading it, the mark is either a barcode of doom, a warning about spiritual betrayal, or a mirror held up to the human soul. One text, yet it splits into infinite paths of interpretation, each carrying its own truth, its own shadow. In the earlier stages of Christian thought, this mark was taken as something literal and terrifying, a physical sign, possibly branded or tattooed, forced upon the body as an expression of loyalty to a dark ruler. This was no poetic metaphor to them. It was a coming reality, a grim future, where the faithful would be forced to choose between survival and salvation. Under Roman rule, this interpretation was colored by the imperial cult of Caesar worship, which demanded acts of allegiance that early Christians considered blasphemy. The mark was imagined as an imposed requirement to participate in society, to eat, to trade, to exist. To take it was to fall. Some theologians and scholars, particularly during the early centuries of persecution, turned to gematria, an ancient numerological practice of assigning numeric values to letters. In the Hebrew rendering of Nero Caesar's name, the numbers add up to 666. To them, the beast wasn't just some future villain. It was Rome itself. Rome with its cruelty, its gods, its iron grip on the lives of believers. Revelation then wasn't just prophecy. It was subversion, encoded resistance against a monstrous regime. The beast wasn't coming. It was already enthroned. As the centuries passed and Christianity transitioned from a persecuted movement to a dominant global force, its symbols began to deepen and evolve. The book of Revelation, once feared and revered as future history, began to be seen through other lenses, especially by mystics, esotericists, and those drawn to inner alchemy. What had been read as literal started to reveal metaphorical dimensions. The forehead and hand, for example, once thought to be the physical locations of the mark, were reimagined as psychological symbols, the mind and the will. To bear the mark meant to think like the beast and to act in accordance with its nature. It meant to serve the values of fear, ego, control, and domination, not through coercion but through consent. In this symbolic light, the beast is not a tyrant with horns but the unchecked ego. It is humanity severed from spirit, man exalting himself as God. 6 in mystical numerology is the number of man, created on the 6th day. But 666, that's the repetition of man raised to false divinity, a parody of the sacred Trinity. It is the perfection of imperfection, the enthronement of illusion. A crown placed on the head of pride, a throne built out of fear and defended by delusion. This interpretation doesn't discard the old fears, it transcends them. It suggests that the real danger is not being branded externally but internally, through thought, through habit, through unconscious agreement. The mark becomes not something forced on you, but something chosen by you when you begin to live as a slave to systems of control, greed, and fear. The soul bends not at the tip of a sword, but at the whisper of temptation. In our time, the symbol has taken on new forms, not from the heavens but from the internet. The mark is now associated with microchips implanted under the skin, vaccine passports linked to biometric data, digital IDs tied to centralized databases, central bank digital currencies with programmable restrictions, and a vast surveillance infrastructure powered by artificial intelligence. For many, these developments seem less like progress and more like prophecy unfolding in real time. The danger, however, lies not only in the tools themselves, but in the frequency these tools generate. Their design, the capacity for centralized oversight, behavioral nudging, and silent surveillance, poses real and growing threats to autonomy. These are not passive technologies. They shape the world and its people, incentivizing compliance and dependency while quietly redrawing the borders of what it means to be human. But the deeper threat, the more insidious one, is spiritual. It's the shift in inner resonance these tools induce, the normalization of fear, the acceptance of monitoring, the internalization of control. Over time, these systems don't just track your behavior, they teach you to police your own mind. What they symbolize becomes more dangerous than what they are. Objects of fixation in a narrative that grows darker with each technological advance. And in that fixation, something essential begins to die. The soul turns cold, the myth becomes a cage. When all of reality is interpreted through the lens of impending doom, the spirit withers. You lose the will to dream, to build, to believe. You may see through the system, but you've also surrendered to it. This is spiritual nihilism disguised as discernment. A worldview that parades as truth but offers no path forward, only the slow erosion of faith in anything beyond the beast. And in that quiet surrender, the mark takes hold, not on the flesh, but in the flame of the soul growing dim. Ironically, this victim posture is the mark itself, the surrender to fear, the acceptance of powerlessness, the belief that you are a victim of forces too great to challenge. It is the energetic equivalent of bowing to the beast, not because you believe in him, but because you've lost faith in anything else. And that, more than any chip or passport, is the true trap. Because it enslaves your inner world, the only domain where real freedom can be born. Mystics see through this entire illusion. They know that the mark of the beast isn't placed on you. It's chosen by you. It's what happens when the divine spark within forgets itself, when spirit is traded for survival, when silence is sold for noise, when the values of Babylon are swallowed whole and rebranded as freedom. To mystics, the beast is the lower self, the part of you that clings to identity, fears loss, hoards power, and craves approval. The mark is not a number, it is a frequency, a psychic scar etched by belief. When spirit is forgotten, even the sacred becomes transactional. Life starts to feel like a ledger, presence measured in output, attention mined like currency, soul reduced to a series of calculated returns. You begin to operate from valuation instead of truth, from measurement rather than meaning. Exchange and structure are not the enemy, they're part of the dance of life. But when they become the dominant language, the only metric of worth, something sacred goes silent. Currency becomes more than money. It becomes the metaphor for everything. Our time, our focus, our energy, all flowing towards systems that do not return us to ourselves. In that distortion, the soul is gradually trained to forget its own wealth. Not because it was bought, but because we stopped treating it as priceless. Not because it was taken, but because we stopped investing in what truly matters. Yet beneath all this symbolism of control, there exists a lesser-known counterpart, one that rarely makes it into the headlines or the conspiracies. The seal of God, a concept found in both Jewish and Christian traditions that to most sounds foreign, occult, even mythic. But within mystical and esoteric teachings, it represents a spiritual imprint, an inner attunement that marks the soul not for domination, but for remembrance. It is essential to understand that the seal of God has nothing to do with any physical mark, and nothing to do with rituals like circumcision. It is not something visible or external. Though some traditions, both ancient and modern, have crafted symbols to represent it, the seal itself is not something etched into flesh or worn around the neck. It is not visible, it is not ceremonial. It is an inner state, an alignment of the soul to something higher, a resonance with truth that transcends all form. It signifies remembrance of the divine, not allegiance to dogma or identity. And it is never a badge of superiority. To believe one bears the seal because they are one of the chosen is to fall right back into the beast's trap. Spiritual pride, elitism, separation. The seal is not a token of ego. It is a quiet, sacred frequency that needs no recognition and asks for no reward. Where the mark of the beast is a signature of unconscious alignment with fear, the seal of God is the conscious resonance of one who remembers the divine within. It is not branded upon you, it is cultivated. It's not a label, it's a frequency of truth vibrating through thought, word, and deed. It is the signature of those who have remembered, those who have purified their thoughts, the symbolic forehead, and aligned their actions, the symbolic hand, with higher truth. It is the mark of those who have chosen alignment over fear, love over survival, clarity over confusion. It is not a rebellion of fists, it is a rebellion of frequency. To bear this seal is not to be perfect. It is to be awake. Not to call yourself awake, as yet even another badge of superiority, but to actually awaken from the system. It is to walk through the matrix without becoming the matrix, to engage with the world without being consumed by it. To see the beast and say, I know you, and I do not serve. Initiation is not a ceremony. It is a collapse of illusion, a dismantling of every lie you've ever believed about yourself. It is the remembering of the eternal, and once you remember, you cannot forget. You no longer need to be afraid of the mark, because you see it for what it truly is, an invitation to forget your divinity, and you decline. So what is the mark of the beast? It is not a barcode, it is not a chip, it is not even a law or a mandate. It is the energy behind them, an internal signature, a spiritual allegiance. It is whether you serve the illusion or the infinite, whether you kneel to control or stand in sovereignty. It is whether your life is defined by unconscious agreement or conscious embodiment. To put it simply, the more you think and act like the beast, egoic, selfish, cruel, or numb, the more deeply its mark is etched into your being. And the more you strive to embody the divine, not through titles or identity, but through humility, compassion, awareness, and love, the more you attune to the seal of God. To live as Christ, as Buddha, as the awakened self as best as you can, not to be praised but to be aligned, is to bear that seal. It's not about being perfect. It's about remembering who you are and acting from that place, again and again and again. Literalists fear it as something done to them. Mystics know it as something chosen by them. You can see which mark is being embodied in others. It shines clearly through their posture, their choices, their prayers, and their silence. But for most of us, it flickers in and out of view. We teeter on the edge, pulled in both directions, one toward unconscious conformity, the other toward awakening. Caught in the current of a world that numbs and distracts, most don't even know they're under a spell. And even when they do, breaking it is not easy. The beast does not simply demand obedience. It clouds perception, dulls intuition, and whispers just enough comfort to keep the soul asleep. And yet, the seal of God still calls. It resonates like a forgotten song beneath the static, beckoning those who have not entirely lost themselves to remember, even if they don't yet know what they're remembering. To reject the mark is not to lash out in anger. It is to reclaim your center, to unhook from the narrative, to break the spell not by shouting but by remembering. The sacred is not gone. It is hidden beneath the noise. And in the stillness of your being, it can be heard again. You do not have to run from the beast. You have to rise above it. Not with fists, but with inner fire. Not with fear, but with the sacred flame. Not with rebellion, but with resonance. You are not a victim. You are a vessel. And when that vessel is filled with divine knowing, no mark can bind you. Only you can answer the call to awaken. To seal yourself not with fear, but with truth. To be branded not by systems, but by spirit. You were never meant to be marked by the beast. You were meant to remember you are made of stars, forged in light, and sealed by eternity. Thanks for watching. If you found value in this video, please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.